The grand hall of the Valyrian palace shimmered with light from 1,000 glowing crystals. Representatives from every corner of the 3 galaxies stood in their finest ceremonial clothing. They had all come for one purpose to witness Princess Hanna choose her mate. Hanna stood on the elevated platform, her silver hair flowing down her back like a waterfall. She was young by Valyrian standards, only 200 years old, but today she had to make the most important decision of her long life. Her mother, Empress Yuri, sat on the throne, watching with careful eyes. Her sisters, Sora and Nari, stood nearby with expressions of curiosity. The suitors lined up before her were impressive. There was a Draconite warrior whose scales gleamed like polished metal, a Nexian scholar whose mind could process information faster than any computer, luminary diplomat who could read emotions like an open book. Each one represented the best their species had to offer. Each one was powerful, intelligent, and nearly immortal like the Valyrians themselves. Lord Kang, the Emperor's chief advisor, stepped forward to begin the ceremony. His voice echoed through the massive hall. Princess Hanna, you have seen the worthy candidates before you. Each has proven their value to the Empire. You must now choose who will stand beside you for eternity. Who do you select? 8. End quote. So Hanna looked at the assembled suitors, then she looked past them toward the back of the hall where the lesser delegation stood. Her eyes found a simple man in plain clothing. He had dark hair and tired eyes. He was human. I choose Te, Hanna said clearly, the human engineer from Earth. The hall exploded into chaos. Gasps and shouts filled the air. The Draconite warrior's eyes widened in shock. The Nexian scholar's calculations seemed to stop working. The luminary diplomat looked like someone had slapped him. Te himself looked completely confused. He had been standing with the Earth delegation trying to understand the translation device in his ear. He was just an engineer who fixed broken machines. He had come to the Valyrian capital because his government needed technical staff for the embassy. He never imagined the princess even knew his name. This is madness, Lord Kaoyuan shouted, forgetting his formal tone. Your Highness, humans are barely civilized. They live less than 100 years. They have no telepathy, no special powers, no enhanced strength. They only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Sora the warrior princess stepped forward. Sister, I respect your independence, but this choice makes no sense. What can a human possibly offer you? Even Nari, usually the gentle one, looked concerned. Hanna, think about this carefully. A human lifetime is like a blink of an eye to us. You will watch him grow old and die while you remain young. Is that really what you want? But Hanna stood firm. Her voice remained calm and steady. I have thought about this for months. I have observed Te and his species carefully. I know exactly what I am doing. Te. Empress Yuri raised her hand and the hall fell silent. Everyone waited to hear what the most powerful being in 3 galaxies would say. Daughter, explain yourself. Why would you choose such a limited being? Hanna walked down from the platform. She moved through the crowd until she stood in front of Te. The human looked terrified but tried to hide it. Up close she could see the details that made him so different from everyone else in the room. Lines around his eyes from years of smiling, calluses on his hands from working with tools, a small scar on his chin from some childhood accident. Mother honored. Guests, let me tell you what I have learned. Hana began. For the past 6 months I have been studying the humans, not their technology or their military capabilities, but their spirit. Do you know what I discovered? She gestured to Tay. Humans know they are weak. They know they are fragile. They know they will die young. Every human lives with these facts every single day, and yet they do not give up. They do not accept their limitations. They find ways around them. Lord Kion scoffed. Clever tricks from desperate creatures? No, Hana said firmly. Innovation, adaptation, growth, these are things we Valerians have forgotten. We were born perfect. We have remained perfect for thousands of years, but when was the last time we truly grew? When was the last time we had to struggle and overcome? She turned to face the entire assembly. I watched Tay repair a quantum stabilizer that our best technician said was beyond fixing. He did not use telepathy to understand its functions. He did not use energy manipulation to force it to work. He studied it, thought about it, tried different approaches, failed repeatedly, and kept trying until he succeeded. That determination, that refusal to accept defeat, that is what I want at my side. Tay finally found his voice. Your Highness, I think there has been a mistake. I am nobody special. I just fix things. Hana smiled at him. That is exactly why you are special. You see problems and you solve them. You do not wait for someone else. With greater power, you use what you have and end well without on until end well. Empress Yuri stood from her throne. The entire hall held its breath. This is highly irregular. The court will never accept it without proof. If you truly believe this human is worthy, then he must face the 5 tests of worth just like any other suitor. Lord smiled wickedly. The 5 tests, Your Majesty, the tests were designed for beings with supernatural abilities. A human will not survive them. Lord smiled. News, a human will not survive them. Then perhaps my daughter's faith is misplaced, the Empress said, but she deserves the chance to prove her choice. Tay of Earth, do you accept this challenge? Tay looked at Hana. He saw something in her eyes that he recognized. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of fellow engineers when they faced impossible problems. It was hope mixed with determination. He had no idea if he loved this alien princess. He had barely spoken to her before today, but he understood being given an impossible task and being expected to fail. He had spent his whole life proving people wrong about what humans could do. I accept, Tay said. The hall erupted into conversation again. Bets were being placed on how quickly the human would die. The Draconite warrior laughed, certain that the first test of combat would end this farce. The Nexian scholar calculated the odds of human success at less than 1%, but Hana walked back to the platform with her head held high. She had made her choice. Now Tay would have to prove that humanity was worthy of standing among the stars. Tay watched her go, his heart pounding. He had just agreed to face tests designed for beings who could move objects with their minds and shoot energy from their hands. He was just a guy who was good with tools. What had he gotten himself into? The arena was massive, built from some kind of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Thousands of spectators filled the seats, all waiting to watch the human fail his first test. Tay stood in the center wearing simple protective gear that the Valyrians had, provided it would not save him from much, but it was better than nothing. Across from him stood Wu, the Draconite champion. He was nearly 8 feet tall with scales that looked harder than steel. His claws could slice through metal like paper. He had won 300 consecutive arena matches. The crowd expected this fight to last less than a minute. Begin. The announcer's voice boomed. Wu charged forward with incredible speed. Tay barely managed to dive out of the way. The Dragonite's claws struck the ground where Tay had been standing, leaving deep gouges in the stone floor. The crowd cheered, excited for the kill. Tay rolled to his feet and ran. He was not ashamed of running. Only an idiot would try to fight Wu directly. As he ran, his engineer's mind worked rapidly. Arena had energy barriers along the walls to protect spectators. There were support pillars every 20 m. The floor was not completely level. Wu chased him, roaring with anger. Stand and fight, little human. Not a chance. Tay shouted back. He grabbed a handful of the sand that lined parts of the arena floor and kept running. The crowd started booing. This was not entertaining. They wanted to see combat, not a chase. Lord leaned back in his seat with a satisfied smile. The human was showing his true nature. Cowardly and weak, but Hana watched carefully. She saw something others missed. Tay was not running randomly. He was moving with purpose, studying the arena, planning something. Wu's patience ran out. He gathered energy in his throat and released a blast of fire that would have incinerated most beings, but Tay had been watching for exactly that. He dove behind a support pillar at the last second. The fire blast hit the pillar instead, heating the stone until it glowed. You cannot hide forever, Wu bellowed. Do not need forever, Tay muttered. Just need a few more minutes. He ran again, this time deliberately, staying near the energy barriers. Wu followed, growing angrier with each passing moment. The Draconite was stronger and faster, but he was fighting with rage instead of tactics. Tay had faced bullies before. They all made the same mistake. They assumed that strength was enough. When Wu charged again, Tay suddenly stopped and threw the sand directly into the Dragonite's eyes. It was a dirty trick, something no honorable warrior would do. Wu roared in pain and surprise, clawing at his face. In that moment, Tay ran to the heated support pillar. He pulled off his protective gloves and used them to grip the hot stone. Then he braced his feet against the base and pushed with all his strength. The pillar had been weakened by Wu and LT Unk and GT's fire blast. With a grinding crack, it started to tip. Wu cleared his eyes just in time to see the massive pillar falling toward him. He tried to dodge, but Tay had counted on that. The falling pillar drove the Dragonite toward the energy barrier. Wu hit the barrier hard, and the defensive field activated automatically to contain him. The energy field was designed to protect spectators from arena combat. Once activated, it would hold anything inside. For safety reasons, Wu was trapped in a cage of his own power, unable to break free without seriously injuring himself. The arena fell completely silent. Tay stood there breathing hard, his hands burned from the hot stone. He looked like he might collapse at any moment. But Wu was contained, unable to continue fighting. The referee seemed uncertain about what to do. This had never happened before. Finally, he raised his hand. The human wins. The crowd exploded into noise. Half were shouting in anger, claiming Tay had cheated. The other half were stunned into silence. Lord Kyle Yuang and LT Unk and GT's face turned an interesting shade of purple. Hana was smiling. The second test came 3 days later, after Ta's burns had been healed by Valerian medicine. This time he faced Scholar Day, the Nexian genius. The test was simple: solve an impossible equation. The equation had billions of variables and would take even the most advanced computer years to process completely. His brain could handle it in hours. A human brain should not be able to make any progress at all. They sat in a quiet room with a massive display screen showing the equation. Day began. Immediately, his eyes moving faster than Tay could follow as he processed the data. Numbers and symbols began rearranging on the screen at incredible speed. Tay looked at the equation and knew he could not compete with raw processing power, so he did not try. Instead, he started looking for patterns. Human brains were very good at finding patterns even when the patterns were not obvious. After an hour, Tay noticed something. Several of the variable groups repeated with slight variations. They were not exactly the same, but they were similar enough. In engineering, when you saw patterns like that, it usually meant you could use approximation techniques. Are you even trying? Day asked, not looking up from his work. You have barely moved. I am thinking, Tay replied. Day laughed. Thinking is what I do. Your brain cannot possibly keep up with mine. You are right, Tay admitted, but that is okay. I do not need to calculate everything perfectly. I just need to find a solution that works. He started working then using approximation methods that would make any mathematician cry. He grouped similar variables together. He rounded numbers that were close enough. He looked for the practical answer instead of the perfect answer. 3 hours later, Day finished his calculations. His answer was perfect, accurate to 15 decimal places. He looked very satisfied with himself. Tay finished 30 minutes later. His answer was not perfect. It was accurate to only 3 decimal places, but when they tested both answers against a real-world scenario, something surprising happened. Both answers worked. Day's perfect answer and Tay's approximate answer both solved the practical problem. The only difference was that Tay had found his answer in half the time. This is impossible, Day said quietly. Your answer should not work. It is full of approximations and shortcuts. It works because sometimes good enough is better than perfect, Tay explained. In engineering, we use approximate methods all the time. Perfect calculations take too long. We need solutions that work now, not perfect answers we get too late to use. Day stared at the human for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. I have learned something today. Logic and calculation are powerful, but sometimes intuition has value too. You pass. The crowd watching the test seemed confused. This was not the decisive victory they expected, but it was still a victory. The human had matched a Nexian scholar through completely different methods. For the third test, Tay was dropped on a death world called Krava. The planet had extreme weather, dangerous predators, and toxic plants. Most species would use their natural abilities to survive. Telepathy to sense danger, flight to escape predators, energy manipulation to purify water. Humans had none of these advantages. For 7 days, Tay was alone. He had only basic survival gear, and his own knowledge. The orbital cameras recorded everything so the audience could watch. The first day Tay nearly died 3 times. A predator almost caught him while he was looking for water. A plant he touched released toxins that made him violently sick. Sudden storm destroyed his first shelter, but each time he adapted, he learned which plants were safe by watching what the local animals ate. He built better shelters using techniques from multiple earth cultures. He made weapons from rocks and branches. He even managed to trap a small predator, and through patient observation and food offerings began to tame it. By day 7, Tay had a functioning campsite. He had a reliable water source, food storage, and a small creature that followed him around like a pet. He had also started mapping which plants were edible and which were dangerous. Future colonists could use that information. When the rescue ship picked up Tay on the 7th day, he was injured and exhausted, but very much alive. The crew could not believe what they saw on his survival recordings. Billions of viewers across the empire had watched the entire week. What started as entertainment became something else entirely. People began talking about human resilience. Social media platforms filled with discussions about survival techniques. Young Valyrians started questioning why they had never learned to build shelters or make tools. The hashtag that appeared most often was simply humans endure. Lord Kion watched these developments with growing alarm. The human was supposed to fail and die, proving that Princess Hanna's choice was foolish. Instead, Tay was becoming popular. This could not continue. The advisor began making secret arrangements to ensure the final 2 tests would be impossible to survive. The 4th test began 2 weeks later. Tay had to negotiate peace between 2 alien species who were on the edge of war. The Balor and the Sith had been fighting over territory for decades. Every attempt at peace had failed. Now, Tay had to succeed where trained diplomats with telepathic and empathic powers had failed. What Tay did not know was that Lord Kaihuang had bribed both sides to reject any solution the human proposed. The test was designed to be unwinnable. Tay sat in a conference room with representatives from both species. The Balor were large, aggressive beings who valued strength above all else. The Sith were smaller, but had powerful psychic abilities. They had hated each other for so long that they barely remembered why the war started. Human, the Balor commander, growled, "You waste our time. Your species has nothing to teach us about war." "You are correct," Tay said simply. "Humans are terrible at war. We have been fighting each other for our entire history." The Sith representative looked confused. "Then why are you here?" "Because we are also very good at eventually making peace," Tay continued. "It takes us a long time and we make many mistakes, but we learn. Can I tell you about Earth?" Both representatives looked skeptical but nodded. Tay began describing human history. He did not glorify it or make excuses. He talked about terrible wars that killed millions. He described weapons so destructive that they could destroy entire cities. He explained how humans had nearly made themselves extinct several times. "We had a war we called World War II," Tay said quietly. 70 million people died. After that war ended, the countries that fought each other became allies. The same nations that were trying to destroy each other started working together. Do you know how? The Balor commander asked. Despite himself, they admitted that everyone had been hurt. They acknowledged that continuing to fight would only create more pain. They chose to build something new instead of destroying what remained. It was not easy. It took decades. Some people never forgave, but slowly peace became normal. The Sith representative leaned forward. You admit your species' weakness openly. Why? Because pretending to be strong when you are not does not help anyone, Tay said. Humans are not the strongest or the smartest. We survive by learning from our mistakes. Every war taught us something. Every peace treaty taught us more. We are still learning something. Shifted in the room. Both representatives started talking more openly about their own losses and frustrations. The conversation became less formal and more honest. They began to see each other not as enemies, but as people who were tired of fighting. Then Lord Kyle Yuang and LT Unk and GT's interference became obvious. Every time they got close to an agreement, one side would suddenly become unreasonable. The shifts were too abrupt, too convenient. Tay noticed the pattern. Someone is manipulating you, Tay said bluntly. Every time we make progress, one of you changes your mind completely. That is not natural. The Balor commander's eyes narrowed. You accuse us of dishonesty. No, I accuse someone else of paying you to be dishonest, Tay replied. He looked directly at the security camera he knew was recording everything. Someone wants this negotiation to fail. Someone wants me to fail, but I think both of you are tired of being used. The Sith representative's psychic abilities suddenly flared. She scanned the room and found hidden recording devices that were not supposed to be there. She found evidence of unauthorized communications. Her face went pale. Lord Kyle Yuang, she whispered. He has been sending us instructions this entire time. The Balor commander roared in anger. We are warriors, not puppets. This insult will not stand. Within an hour, the evidence was public. Lord Kyle Yuang had sabotaged the peace talks to make Tay fail. Both the Balor and the Sith were furious at being manipulated. They signed a preliminary peace agreement out of spite, if nothing else. Tay passed the fourth test, but now Lord Kyle Yuang was desperate. He had one more chance to stop the human. The fifth and final test was the void chamber. It was a room that nullified all supernatural abilities. Inside, beings who relied on telepathy or energy manipulation would be helpless. The environment would become increasingly hostile. Extreme temperatures, low oxygen, high pressure. It tested how someone handled adversity when stripped of their advantages. Normally, candidates only needed to survive for 1 hour. Lord Kyle modified the chamber in secret. He made the conditions lethal. The temperature swings alone should kill any biological being. He was going to murder Tay and make it look like an accident. Hana discovered the sabotage 20 minutes before the test began. She ran to the control room, but Imperial law was clear. Once a test began, no one could interfere. She could only watch helplessly as Tay walked into the chamber. The door sealed behind him. Immediately, all the lights went out. The temperature dropped to freezing. Tay's breath came out in visible puffs. Billions watched on screens across the empire. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Would the human finally fail? The temperature started rising rapidly, freezing to boiling in less than a minute, Ta's engineering training kicked in. He started regulating his breathing, controlling his body temperature as much as possible. He had worked in extreme environments before, the heat of engine rooms, the cold of space stations, but this was worse than anything he had experienced. The oxygen level dropped. Pressure increased. The chamber was trying to kill him through multiple methods at once. Tay found himself thinking about Earth, his home planet, was a death world by galactic standards. Extreme weather, dangerous animals, diseases that evolved as fast as the cures. Humans survived Earth by being stubborn and adaptable. He had those same qualities in his DNA. 20 minutes passed. Tay's body was failing, but his mind stayed sharp. He noticed patterns in how the chamber changed conditions. There was a rhythm to it, a system, and systems could be understood. 30 minutes. His vision started to blur, but he found small pockets in the chamber where conditions were slightly less terrible. He moved between them, buying himself precious seconds of relief. 40 minutes. The watching crowd was silent now. No one expected the human to last this long. Some people were crying. They were watching a person slowly die, and it felt wrong. Hana pressed her hands against the control room window, whispering prayers in the old Valyrian language. 50 minutes. Tay collapsed to his knees. Every breath was agony, but then he saw something, a control panel, partially hidden in the wall. The chamber was not just a random death trap. It had systems, and systems could be manipulated using a piece of metal. He tore from his own clothing buckle. Tay started working on the panel. His hands shook terribly. He could barely see, but he had spent his entire adult life fixing broken machines in bad conditions. This was just another repair job. 58 minutes. Tay managed to access the panel's basic functions. He could not turn off the chamber entirely, but he could create a feedback loop in the environmental controls. The chamber's own safety systems would detect the loop and shut down. 59 minutes and 43 seconds. The chamber's lights flickered. The safety systems registered an error. Automatic shutdown. Initiated. The door opened. Medical teams rushed in and found Tay unconscious on the floor, barely breathing, but he was alive. The crowd watching erupted into cheers so loud they could be heard across the capital city. Strangers hugged each other in the streets. The human had survived the impossible. In the medical facility, an hour later, Emperor himself appeared. He stood beside Tay's bed where the human was slowly recovering. Hana held Tay's hand tightly. I must apologize, the Emperor said formally. Lord has been arrested for sabotage and attempted murder. This should never have happened. Tay's voice was weak but steady. Did I pass? The Emperor actually smiled. Yes, human, you passed all 5 tests. You have earned the right to stand beside my daughter. Tay spent 3 weeks recovering in the Imperial Medical Facility. The Valyrian doctors could heal almost any injury, but they had never treated a human before. Everything took longer than expected. During those weeks, Tay had plenty of time to think about what had happened and what it meant for his future. He had become famous across 3 galaxies. People called him the human who proved his worth and the princess's champion. News organizations wanted interviews. Scientists wanted to study him. Children wanted his autograph. It was overwhelming for someone who just wanted to fix machines and live quietly. Ambassador Sung from Earth visited him. In the hospital, the older man sat beside Tae's bed with a serious expression. "Do you understand what you have done?" Sun asked. "I survived some tests." Tae said carefully, "You changed humanity's position in the galaxy." Sun corrected. "Before you we were barely noticed, just another primitive species learning to crawl among the stars. Now every major power is sending diplomats to Earth. Trade agreements are being discussed. We have a voice in galactic politics for the first time." Tae felt a weight settle on his chest. "I did not ask for that." "No, but you have it anyway. Now you must decide. Will you accept Princess Hana's offer? If you say yes, humanity rises with you. If you say no." Sun paused. "It would be seen as an insult to the imperial family. All the goodwill you built could disappear, so I have to marry her to help Earth." Tae felt anger rising. "That is not fair. Life rarely is." Sun said gently, "But I am not here to pressure you. I am here to make sure you understand the consequences of your choice, whatever it may be. W team, we have heed the budding. W have to with your fifth W team. I kens to 2000 after Sun left. Tae stared at the ceiling for a long time. He barely knew Hana. Yes, she was beautiful and intelligent. Yes, she had chosen him when she could have had anyone, but was that love, or was it just two people caught up in something bigger than themselves? The door opened quietly. Hana entered, carrying a small bag. "I brought you something," she said. "Food from Earth." The embassy staff said, "You might appreciate it." Tae sat up carefully. Inside the bag was a simple sandwich and an apple. Nothing fancy, but it was real Earth food, not the nutritional paste the hospital provided. He started eating gratefully. Hana sat in the chair beside his bed. "We should talk," she said. "Yes, we should," Tae agreed. "I have been thinking. You chose me in front of the entire empire, and I have no idea why. You could have picked someone powerful, someone who would live as long as you do. Instead, you picked a human who will be dead in a few decades. That does not make sense." Quote, Hana looked down at her hands. "I have been watching your species since we made first contact. Do you know what I saw? Growth. Every year humans achieve something new. Every generation builds on the last. You are always reaching for something better." She looked up at him. "Valerians are born perfect. We have been perfect for thousands of years. We do not grow anymore. We just exist, eternal and unchanging. When I watched you work, when I saw you face problems without giving up, I realized what we had lost. That drive, that need to improve, to overcome. I wanted that in my life, but I will grow old," Tae said quietly. "In 40 or 50 years I will be elderly. You will still be young and beautiful. How can that work?" "I do not know," Hana admitted, "but Valerians measure everything in millennia. We are patient. We are careful. We are also incredibly bored. You humans live every day like it matters because your time is limited. Maybe that is exactly what I need to remember, how to live instead of just existing." Tae ate his apple slowly. "Thinking your sisters visited me yesterday," he said. "I know. Sora tried to teach me Valerian combat techniques. She said if I am going to be part of the imperial family, I should at least be able to defend myself properly." Tae smiled slightly. "I was terrible at it." She seemed pleased anyway. Tae smiled. Tae smiled. Sora respects determination. Hana said, "You have proven you have that, Nari asked me. About human philosophy, Tay continued. We talked for 3 hours about the meaning of mortality. She said it was the most interesting conversation she had in a century. My sisters have accepted you. Hana said, that is important, but what about you? Do you accept this situation? Before Tay could answer, the door opened. Again, this time Empress Yuri entered. Both Tay and Hana immediately tried to stand and bow, but the Empress waved them back down. I have come with an offer, Yuri said without preamble. She was direct and efficient, just like her reputation suggested. Tay, you have proven your worth as a mate for my daughter. However, the issue of lifespan remains. I can offer you genetic modification. We can extend your life to match ours. We can give you telepathic abilities, perhaps even energy manipulation. You could become like us. Tay stared at her. The offer was incredible. Who would refuse near immortality and supernatural powers? There must be a catch, he said. Carefully, Yuri's lips curved into a small smile. Intelligent. Yes, there is a consideration. If you become Valyrian, you will no longer be human. You will lose what makes your species unique. The very qualities my daughter claims to value would be gone. So this is a test, Tay. What do you choose? Tay looked at Hana. She was watching him carefully, her expression neutral. He could not tell what she wanted him to say. He thought about Earth, about struggling to fix broken equipment with limited tools, about working in dangerous conditions because the job needed to be done, about being weak and fragile and mortal and doing great things anyway. I refuse, Tay said firmly. Both Hana and Yuri looked surprised. You refuse immortality? Yuri asked. Explain. Princess Hana said she chose me because I am human, Tay said. Because humans struggle and adapt and refuse to give up despite our limitations. If I become Valyrian, I stop being the person she chose. I would just be another powerful being, pretending to understand mortality. He looked directly at Hana. If you want someone who will live forever and never change, there are millions of Valyrians to choose from. But if you want me, you get a human. That means I will age. I will eventually die, but every moment I have will be genuine, not an imitation of what you already know. Yuri was quiet for a long moment, then she laughed. Sound like crystal bells. You understand, she said. Good. My daughter chose better than I thought. The Empress left without another word. Tay and Hana sat in silence. You really meant that? Hana asked softly. You would rather die young than become immortal? I would rather be myself, Tay said, even if that self is limited and temporary. Besides, maybe that is humanity's real gift. We know we will die, so we try to make our short time matter. We build things that will outlast us. We teach the next generation. We try to leave the world better than we found it. Hana reached out and took his hand. Her skin was smooth and perfect. His was scarred and calloused. They were completely different, and somehow that felt right. I can watch you grow old, she said quietly. I can handle that pain if you can handle being with someone who will outlive you by thousands of years. Then we are both choosing something difficult, Tay said. That seems appropriate for us. They sat together in comfortable silence, two beings from completely different worlds trying to build something new between them. 6 months after the 5 tests, preparations for the bonding ceremony began. However, imperial tradition required one final thing. Tay had to present a legacy. Gift. This was something that would benefit the Valyrian Empire for generations to come. Previous suitors had offered advanced technology, military strategies, or access to rare resources. Tay spent weeks thinking about what he could possibly offer. He was just an engineer. He had no secret weapons or advanced inventions. Earth's technology was primitive compared to the Valyrian Empire. What could he give that they did not already have? Then he realized he could give them something they had lost. Perspective. On the day of the presentation, Tay Clear's throat stood before the imperial court with a simple data crystal. I offer the human archive, he announced. A complete record of human history, philosophy, art, and culture, not just our victories but our failures, our wars, our mistakes, and the slow lessons we learned from them. Lord and Lt. Unk and GT's replacement, a stern woman named Ren, looked skeptical. Because we remember what struggle means, Tay explained. Valyrians have been perfect for so long that you have forgotten how to grow. You solve problems with power instead of creativity. You avoid failure instead of learning from it. Humans fail constantly. We are experts at making mistakes and surviving them. He activated the data crystal. Images filled the air, human art showing both beauty and suffering, historical records of terrible wars and hard-won peace, philosophical texts questioning everything from the meaning of life to the nature of justice. I propose establishing human studies as a field of study throughout the empire. Tay continued. Let your scholars examine how a weak species survives through adaptation. Let your military study how humans win battles against stronger opponents. Let your artists see how mortality influences creativity. We have something to teach even if we are not as advanced. Scholar Day, who had become friendlier with Tay since their tests, stood up. I support this proposal. I have been studying human innovation since the tests. There are patterns in human development that do not exist in long-lived species. Humans iterate rapidly. Each generation builds on the last, learning from failures that beings who live thousands of years might spend centuries trying to avoid. The proposal caused immediate debate. Some Kurders thought it was insulting to learn from humans. Others were genuinely curious. Within a week, 3 major universities had announced new departments of human studies. The most popular course was titled Innovation Through Limitation: How Humans Turn Weakness into Strength. The bonding ceremony itself was a blend of human and Valyrian traditions. Tay wore a simple black suit from Earth, while Hana wore elaborate imperial robes that seemed to be woven from light itself. The ceremony took place in the Grand Temple with thousands of guests from hundreds of worlds. Instead of the traditional telepathic binding that Valyrians used, Hana insisted on spoken vows. Words can be remembered, she said. They can be held accountable. That is more meaningful than a silent mental bond. When the time came, Tay spoke first. His voice was steady despite his nervousness. I cannot promise you forever because I do not have forever to give, but I promise you every day I have. I promise to help you remember why struggle matters, why growth matters, why hope matters. I promise to be human with all the limitations and possibilities that includes Hana's vows brought tears to many eyes, human and alien alike. You have taught me that a single lifetime lived fully is worth more than 1,000 years of perfection. I choose the finite and precious over the eternal and empty. I choose to love you knowing it will hurt when you are gone, because the alternative is never loving at all. The ceremony ended with them exchanging simple gold rings, a human tradition. Hana wore hers proudly even though Valian marriage customs did not include such symbols. The celebration lasted 3 days. During that time something unexpected happened. Ambassadors from species that had been considered lesser began approaching the imperial court with new confidence. If humans could prove their worth, maybe others could. 2. Princess Sara started a military exchange program. Valyrian soldiers began training with human instructors, learning tactics that did not rely on supernatural abilities. The results were remarkable. Soldiers who had always depended on telepathy learned to communicate with hand signals and technology. Warriors who used energy blasts learned to fight with strategy instead of raw power. Princess Nari established research partnerships with Earth's universities. Human scientists brought different perspectives to problems that Valyrian scholars had been stuck on for centuries. The combination of human creativity and Valyrian resources led to breakthroughs in multiple fields. The Valyrian Empire began to change. It was slow, as change always is in a civilization thousands of years old, but it was real. Tay and Hana settled into married life. They lived in a modest residence by imperial standards, though it would have been a palace on Earth. Tay continued his engineering work, now helping to redesign Valyrian infrastructure using human principles of adaptive systems. 5 years passed. Tay was 39 years old now, with gray hair starting to show at his temples. Han looked exactly the same as the day they met. Sometimes people stared at them in public. The unchanging princess and the aging human. Their daughter Gia was born. In the 5th year, she was the first human Valyrian hybrid, a biological impossibility that happened anyway, because Valyrian medical science could do miraculous things. Gia had her mother's silver hair and telepathic abilities, but her father's curiosity and problem-solving instincts. She is perfect, Hana whispered, holding the baby carefully. She is ours, Tay corrected gently. That is better than perfect. Oh, the day Gia was born, celebrations erupted across both Earth and the Valyrian capital. She represented something new, a bridge between species, a combination of ancient power and youthful innovation. 10 years after the wedding, Tay stood in the grand auditorium of the First Academy of Human Studies on the Valyrian capital world. He was 44 now, definitely showing his age, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Thousands of students from hundreds of species filled the seats. Welcome. Tay began his speech to the study of humanity. We are not the strongest species, we are not the smartest, we are not the longest lived, but we have something that every species needs to remember. We know we are limited, and we decided that is okay. He walked across the stage, his movement a bit slower than it used to be. Humans survive through stubbornness and creativity. We face problems we cannot overpower, so we find ways around them. We know we will die, so we make sure our short time matters. That is not weakness, that is Wisdom, the audience listened intently. These were not just Valyrians, but representatives from across the empire. Species that had been dismissed as primitive were now being reconsidered. If humans could contribute meaningfully, perhaps others could too. The greatest strength is not living forever, Tay continued. It is not having perfect knowledge or unlimited power. The greatest strength is knowing your limitations and working within them to achieve something meaningful anyway. That is what humans do. That is what every species can do if they choose. The speech ended with thunderous applause. Tay left the stage and found Hana waiting in the wings with 10-year-old Gia. His daughter ran to him, her telepathic abilities already showing, but her enthusiasm purely human. Papa. That was amazing, Gia said. Hana smiled at him. He could see the calculations. Her eyes, he had perhaps 30 or 40 good years left. She would have thousands of years after that, but she had chosen this and she did not regret it. That night in their private quarters, Hana showed Tay her personal journal. She had been keeping it since they met. When you are gone, she said quietly, I will have this. Every moment, every memory I will remember. That sounds painful, Tay said. Yes, Hana agreed, but pain means it mattered. Love that costs nothing has no value. 20 years later, Tay was 64. His hair was completely gray and he moved with the careful slowness of age. But his mind remained active and his influence had spread across the empire. The human studies now existed on 50 worlds. The concept of learning from limitations had become mainstream philosophy. Gia had grown into a remarkable young woman. She led the Imperial Science Council, combining Valyrian knowledge with human innovation. Her hybrid nature let her see solutions that pure Valyrians or pure humans might miss. On his 64th birthday, Tay sat in the garden with Hana. They had done this every evening for 20 years, watching the alien sunset together. Do you regret it? Tay asked. Choosing someone who would only be with you for such a short time. Hana took his aged hand in her eternally young one. Never. You gave me something more valuable than forever. You gave me purpose. You reminded an entire empire what it means to grow and struggle and overcome. Millions of beings live differently because you existed. Tay smiled. That is a pretty good legacy for a guy who just wanted to fix machines. Tay smashing, sir. Tay T smashing, sir. Tay T smashing, sir. You fixed something bigger than machines. Hana said. You fixed our perspective. The sun set on the Valyrian capital, painting the sky in colors that did not exist on Earth. An immortal princess and an aging human sat together, their time together, limited and precious. In the distance, students at the Human Studies Academy were debating the meaning of mortality. On a dozen worlds, species that had been dismissed were now being respected. Throughout the empire, beings who had relied on power were learning the value of creativity. One human had changed everything, not through strength or immortality, but by being himself, by struggling, adapting and refusing to give up. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, and it would echo long after Tay himself was gone.